Recording in progress. Welcome. Thank you for joining us tonight for the edition of French-American Histories that we do every month here at the French Embassy. And it's a series that focuses on the many facets of French-American relations and particularly French history. And so it's presented by the French Embassy of the United States, but also Villa Albertine and the Federation of the Alliance Françaises here in the United States. So in this episode, we're going to focus on NATO. So we're going to focus on the 75th anniversary of NATO that's going to be celebrated very soon at a big summit here in Washington, D.C. And has been celebrated also on April 4th in Brussels, which was, of course, the moment when it's been signed 75 years ago. So this historical milestone is, of course, important for us today to reflect on NATO's importance right now, but also on the French-American cooperation within NATO. That, of course, has happened since its inception, since 75 years now of cooperation. So with me, I'm very happy and honored to be speaking today to Colonel Nicolas Durand, who is a French National Liaison Representative at NATO Supreme Allied Command Transformation in Norfolk, Virginia. It's a mouthful, but we'll find out what that really means in this episode. And so it's based, of course, Norfolk, Virginia, at the base that we're also discussing today. Our discussion will mainly delve into the pivotal themes relating to NATO, NATO's history, why NATO exists, what they're doing today, and what's particularly happening in Norfolk and in your division you're active in. We're also, of course, going to reflect on its anniversary and its importance for today's world, and touch on some of the future elements NATO will be involved in. And so we're also going to focus right now, start with on Monsieur Durand's. I have to say that I have a problem pronouncing colonel in the English word, but colonel is easier to say, so I'll probably go for that. But so Colonel Durand, his own missions and initiatives. So to kick it off, let's start with who you are. So maybe you can present yourself to us in a brief overview of your role within that French delegations at NATO Supreme Allied Command Transformation. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. Good evening, bonsoir. I'm Colonel Nicolas Durand. I'm a French Army officer. I've been in the French Army for basically now 30 years, with a career that is mainly characterized by two main trends. The first one being command in operations. I've been deployed to several combat missions. And the other trend is strategic affairs and international relations, served in Paris and Brussels before coming to Norfolk, Virginia, where since last year, Norfolk, the national French representative there at the NATO headquarters, the ACT, we're going to come back on that, in Norfolk. My mission there in Norfolk is mainly twofold. The first main part of my mission is the liaison, is to establish and maintain the link between Norfolk and Paris and make sure that all the work done in Norfolk is well known in Paris and vice versa. So that's the first main mission. The second one is a more traditional commanding responsibilities for the national military community in Norfolk. So to sum it up, on one hand, I'm a kind of a bridge between Norfolk and Paris. And, I'm also a kind of a small matter player of the French military community.
Impressive career.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you. So before we dive into the other aspects, maybe some of us need a little refresher on what NATO really is, what's its history, its creation, and maybe an overview of some of its activities and work streams.
Well, I don't know how familiar you are with NATO. So I prepared a slide for you, trying to really summing up the very basic facts of NATO in a nutshell. So on the right part of the slide, you've got the DNA of NATO. What is NATO all about? NATO is a political and military defensive alliance. So it was political and military and defense. That is really the core. Its members are committed to protecting each other from any threat. That is the core of the NATO treaty, of the North Atlantic Treaty, which was signed here in Washington D.C. in 1949, and it's the famous Article 5 of the treaty, which is really the core of the alliance, which means that if any nation member of the alliance is attacked, all the other members have to do something to react in support of the nation which is under attack. Which is very, very important about NATO is the core values and the shared principles of NATO, which NATO is based on, which are democracy, freedom, individual liberty, human rights, and the rule of law. This year is a very special year for NATO because we're going to celebrate the 75th anniversary. It means it's very significant because it means that NATO is the oldest alliance in history, and it's also the most successful because it kept all the countries together and all the countries safe. So on the left-hand side of the slide, you get a very brief summary of the history of NATO, which we divided today in, say, three main phases. The first one, let's say, the origins of NATO were just after World War II. NATO was designed to protect our nations against the Soviet Union. So this is what that treaty in 1949, and after that we went to the Cold War against the Soviet Union. That is the first phase. It was successful. At the end of the day, NATO countries and Western countries were successful in defeating the Soviet Union that collapsed in the early 90s. This is the second phase where, let's say, the big enemy of NATO collapsed. So NATO at that stage in the 90s wondered what we have to do now, what do we have to fight for, what do we have to prepare for. And the second phase from the 90s to the year 2000, 2010, NATO went into a new phase characterized by the coming to NATO of many new members. In that phase, we came from 12 nations, the original nations, to 32 today. So it was a big expansion. And the other trend was the work of NATO was much more dedicated to crisis management operations, and so a broader spectrum of missions, especially after 9/11. After 9/11, that was the first time and the only time that Article 5, the collective security, collective defense, was invoked by the other nation in support of the United States, which were under attack. So NATO went into crisis management operations in the former Yugoslavia, in the Mediterranean, in the Middle East, and Afghanistan, of course, in that phase. And the third phase of this history is the phase we are in now. We're coming back to our roots, to the origin, because Russia is coming back again to a very aggressive position and stance. So NATO is coming back to collective defense against that threat. And this is the phase that has begun, let's say, between 2014, when Russia started to invade Crimea in Ukraine, and then, of course, after February 22, where with the aggression of Russia against Ukraine, now we came back to what NATO was originally made for after World War II.
Yes, which must be one of your main occupations today, of course, to
absolutely
handle that. So let's go to maybe more happy subject is an anniversary, 25th anniversary of NATO this month. Of course, it's celebrated at a big summit organized with many world leaders coming for that, of course, here in DC. So can you provide some insights on that anniversary, but also especially why is it so important to celebrate such a moment?
Well, the very first thing which is important, it's because it's the 75th anniversary, so that's quite a long and successful alliance, and it was signed here in DC, so in April, 4th April 49. So it's very meaningful to come back to Washington, DC 75 years after that. The summit is going to take place here in DC in a few days. Head of states, presidents, ministers will gather here in DC. They are still negotiating what they will say, and I have no crystal ball on that, but we expect that there will be two main reasons for celebrating that anniversary and for having that summit here in DC. The first one is to demonstrate the unity and collective strength the alliance today. And there are many reasons for that. The NATO leaders, strong will to continue to further strengthen and the alliance, commit a lot of resources, a lot of defense budget in that, and keep the bonds within the alliance very strong. So I think this is going to be one of the main messages. And the other one also will be, which is linked, is the support to Ukraine, which is very key. NATO is not out at war with Russia, but most of the countries in the alliance support Ukraine very strongly with trainers, with equipment, with budget, with finance, a lot of things. And I think this is going to be one of the keys of the summit, to reassure, to say again that we stand with Ukraine, and that we don't want Russia to win that war.
So we're going to push now to Norfolk, because of course that's where we work. Before we can focus on, maybe you can explain how NATO is structured briefly, so that we can understand what the base in Norfolk does, and then any of these bases are in the world. How is it organized? Or that we have another slide.
Before zooming to Norfolk, I'm going to talk a little bit about the NATO structure, and I'm going to try to stay very generic and with very key features of NATO today. So I put that on that slide where you have on the top left, you have the NATO's political brain, which is in Brussels. In Brussels, you have around the North Atlantic Council, which is the council that gather all the head of states or head of governments and ambassadors, which is really the top political level of NATO. And you have around that two main organizations. On one hand, you've got the NATO delegations of the representative of the nations, ambassadors or military representative that gather around the military committee. Mm-hmm. And you have, on another hand, let's say the permanent NATO staff, which are in Brussels, around the Secretary General, and he has a staff, an international staff, and an international military staff that is working for the military committee. Mm-hmm. So all these bodies are working for the leadership of the alliance, with the nations and the permanent staff working for that. Under that, and it's at the center of the slide, those two green circles. These are the strategic commands, the military strategic commands of NATO, and there are two. There are two commands. One is NATO ACT. This is Norfolk, where I work. It's led by a French general, and it's an headquarters that is tasked with transforming the alliance, working on the future of our military capabilities to maintain the edge in the decades to come. So that is ACT in Norfolk, and you have also on the other side ACO in Mons, which is the Allied Command for Operations. This is in Mons, Belgium, and this is where SACEUR, a US general, is commanding that strategic headquarters. He's also the commander of the US forces in Europe. And he has under his responsibility all the operations of NATO and all the NATO command structure. That is the last part of the slide on the bottom right. That NATO command structure, which are several operational commands, including Joint Forces Command. There are 3 Joint Forces Command, one in Naples, Italy, one in Brunssum, Netherlands, and the last one in Norfolk as well, JFC Norfolk. So this is the second headquarters, NATO headquarters in Norfolk. You have 2 headquarters in Norfolk. I'm going to come back on that. And you also have 3 what we call component commands, or let's say functional commands, which are dedicated to the effects we need to have on land, air, and maritime. Well, I'm not going to go into more details on that because the command structure, there are a lot of other headquarters, bodies, but it's quite complicated. But the bottom line is that these permanent headquarters, they are very useful to us because this is one of the biggest NATO strengths because those headquarters are permanent. They use the same procedures, they have common culture, they are trained together, they do exercise together. They are ready. This is what we call interoperability. If we need some someday, don't wish so, but need to wait for together those headquarters. They will be standing and they will be ready for it. So that's in a nutshell what we can say about the NATO structure today.
I think it's interesting for the public to understand how it's all organized because it's we always hear NATO, but how is that all organized? And particularly here in the United States, because they're a big base, as you explained, there's 2 different sort of departments within, or not sure how you call that department, but 2 structures. And so can you tell us why Norfolk was chosen as the base? And it's quite a recent one, of course. It's it's it is maybe the most recent probably base that has been created by NATO, and of course the first and only in the United States. So could you explain why that was, but also what they in particularly do?
Well, Norfolk is a very nice region. That's the first thing, and I'm not sure it's why, because it is the reason why NATO chose that area. No, more seriously speaking, Norfolk. The first thing is that Virginia is a very rich region in terms of military history. History of the United States. Norfolk was first settled in 1636. It has a rich tradition of military history, especially during the American Revolution. We're going to come back on that. And it's today a worldwide center of maritime excellence. This is the biggest naval base in the world, military naval base in the world. So for all these reasons, it made sense to have a NATO headquarters there because it's very important for the relationship between America and Europe and the European allies. So they see that headquarters for transformation continues to facilitate those links, those cooperation between NATO and North America with partnership, innovation, and also community relationships. We have it's a staff that is also manned with local civilians, so very deeply rooted in local communities in Norfolk and the Hampton Roads area. It creates very strong link between the local American communities and all the countries of the alliance, because 30 countries of the alliance are represented at that headquarters. So ACT was based on the previous headquarters, Allied headquarters that we had there, we used to have there, which was the Allied Command for the Atlantic area. But after the 9/11 attacks, NATO nations realized that they had to do something not to be surprised again with that kind of strategic surprise. They need an headquarters, they need a staff to not to be in today's operation, but they need the staff to think about the future and think about the future strategies, future equipment, future capabilities. So this is why in 2003, ACT was created, taking its role at NATO's Strategic Warfare Development Command. So that is the I mentioned before. This is one of the two strategic commands of NATO today. As I said, you have another small headquarters, which is an operational headquarters for operations, the JFC, Norfolk, in the North Atlantic area. JFC Norfolk also has a mission to link with the United States Second Fleet, which is based in Norfolk. So that link is also very important. And that's it for Norfolk. I could speak for hours, but it's pretty much technical and military. But we can.
And we will talk more about the future and what you're doing there, the innovations, the new technologies, but also the very recent, but also new potential threats. So we'll discuss that after. But we are, of course, talking about French-American relations here at the French Embassy. So we'll go a little bit to France and then go back to the future. So we'll go a bit more to history again, actually. So could you tell us about the key historical milestones that have defined France's involvement within NATO?
Well, if we look back at our common history, the first milestone that comes in mind is the beginning. It's 1949, because France was, as the United States, one of the 12 founding members of NATO. We were among the signatory here in Washington, D.C. For the North Atlantic Treaty. And at the beginning, I think many people have forgot that, but the NATO headquarters were in Paris, France, and SHAPE, the ACO headquarters were in the vicinity of Paris as well. So that was the origins. Another important milestone when we talk about France and NATO is, of course, 1966, when General de Gaulle decided to withdraw France, not from the alliance, but from the command structure. So we withdrew the military officers we had within the NATO structures, headquarters, and all NATO forces which were stationed in France had to withdraw. But France remained within NATO, and I will.
Can you briefly explain why they withdrew?
Well, basically, General de Gaulle considered that it was very important that we remained in the alliance, that we remained one of the allied, but keeping our sovereignty, our autonomy of decision. This is a time where France was looking at the world, its interest in the world, the way to protect himself, to defend himself. We were just 25 years after World War II, so a lot of things were still in the French mind at that time. This is also the time where we were developing our army on defense issues of that.
Yeah. And then there were, of course, other moments such as 2009.
Yeah, that's moving forward to present day. President Sarkozy decided to come back within the structure, which was not that a change, because we always been there. We never left, really. During all those decades we continue to to operate with the other allied. We continue to participate to the same operations, to the NATO operations. We continue to participate in the exercise. We were still there. So coming back in the structure just was normal for us. It was, I think it was the feeling, the general feeling in the French army was we're coming back to the place, the natural place of which is ours. And today, I think the other allied, and especially the United States, they see us, France, as quite a reliable and credible ally. Not only because we went back to the command structure, but because we have capabilities, and this is what we usually call the 3 C's. The first is cash, because we have a defense budget that is above 2% of our GDP, which is a significant effort, and most of that budget is dedicated to modernization, to keeping the best equipment, the most modern equipment in the French armed forces. So that's the first C. The second C is capabilities, where we try, and I think we succeed in reaching the goals that NATO sets up for all the defense planning of the capacities of the alliance that we are developing collectively. And the third C is commitment, and once again, this is operational commitment. And in every NATO operation in that part of history, we've been there. France has been there with units, with capable units. Either maybe we're going to talk about those operations, but today it's on the eastern flank where the threat is, and we have a lot of French forces from the Baltic states to Romania. A lot of people deployed there. Does not make us an ally like the other ones. France remain an ally that is what we say non-aligned, that may have his own views, and maybe sometimes says yes, but or no. But that is what we are, our defense policy here. But anyway, today we have a common understanding that all what we're doing in terms of military affairs, we have to do that in coalitions, and with NATO especially. One of the key points of our military strategy today is that we want to win the war before the war. So to do that, you need to be more deterrent, and you need to have allies. So I think this is very much in line with what NATO is trying to achieve today. So and France is in that respect is one of the main allies in that alliance today.
Thank you. So about the French role, we now have a good overview, but what about the particular cooperation between France and the United States within NATO?
Well, it's a very strong relationship at military level, especially. We share a lot of things with our US counterparts, a lot of things in terms of military culture. Of course, we don't have the same size of army, but let's say we have the same shape, we have the same spectrum. France, once again, we managed, I think, to keep today a full spectrum, able armies being able to do full intensity, high intensity combat down to crisis management, peacekeeping operations. And I think more or less like the US military. And we've been developing that, and we've been with our US allies during that history and the recent history in post-Cold War operations. We've been together in many places where we had to carry out operations in the former Yugoslavia, for example, in Bosnia or Kosovo. We were together, of course, fighting terrorism in Afghanistan for mostly a decade, almost a decade. And for example, in Libya also together. In all those operations, we went in a very strong and very close military cooperation. We also were together in counterterrorism efforts in, for example, in the Mediterranean, where we did a maritime operation together with the US. We were in many military exercises together, but that cooperation went also into more industrial defense technology cooperations, and also nowadays in new domains where the war is going into, for example, cyberspace, disinformation, or space. We have quite a strong cooperation between France and the US for those issues, including the new ones.
Which is mainly your specialty, the new...
In Norfolk, yeah.
Yes, in Norfolk. So of course, these are the positive, let's say, sides of the great cooperation between the US and France within NATO. There's of course also some challenges within that particular relationship.
Yeah, absolutely. We there was some discussions, some disagreements at some points. But I would say, like in every family, you're not always, you don't have always to agree on everything. But we always manage to discuss the issues. Once again, we're not an ally that always says no, or always says yes. We say sometimes yes, but, or we may discuss that because we have our own view on that. This is basically the French desire for autonomy, for sovereignty, which General de Gaulle showed when he decided to withdraw in '66 from the integrated command structure. We had some disagreement from time to time on the general strategy or on military spending, because military spending it's always an issue. You know, when your economy is struggling, it's very difficult, especially when your main enemy is disappearing. To put big budgets into the defense is always very challenging. We also have competition sometimes in the field of industry. We have big industries, defense industries. Sometimes, you know, like there are businesses that are competing against each other, and that's quite understandable. However, at the end of the day, at military level, we always kept very strong bonds, very good relationship, which are based mainly on the common military culture that we share together, and this is very important because we can have discussions, we can have disagreements, but at the end of the day, for the main important things, we all know that we'll be there together.
Which leads perfectly into the next question I would like to ask, which is about that bond between France and America that, of course, has lasted at least 250 years, particularly, of course, the relationship between France and America during the American Revolution, which is really the beginning of their alliance and their official alliance in 1778, which of course will be celebrated in 2026. But then there's also some actual milestones, such as the First World War, Second World War, where the United States came to France to save France, to create these values you have, or to defend together these values that they have shared already since all these years of alliance. And of course, D-Day has been celebrated. The American Revolution will be celebrated. And so could you maybe tell us a bit more about that bond and why it's so relevant today and why it's a core part of NATO?
Yeah, it's the first thing that I want to say is that the United States and France, we have a very rich common history right from the beginning. And the two main chapters that I would like to dig on a little bit is, of course, the American Revolution.
Yeah.
And after that, I will talk a little bit about World War II, which was also significant milestones. American Revolution. I mean, France is the U.S. oldest ally. We were there at that time, and in Virginia, in Norfolk, in the Hampton Roads area, we are quite familiar to that because once again, that region is very rich in terms of American Revolution milestones. This is where Lafayette was at the beginning when he came. This year we celebrate the 200th anniversary of Lafayette tour when he came back to the US a few years after that. But next year we will celebrate Rochambeau, which was one of the other military leaders of the French military leaders of that time. It's 300th anniversary. This is also Virginia and Norfolk. It is the place where we had that battle, that naval battle where Count de Grasse beat the British fleet, which later on allowed for the victory in Yorktown, which is not very far from Norfolk. So in that region, we see that common history is everywhere, and we have very strong bonds, very good relationship with the local communities, American communities, with the local American associations who are dealing with that part of history. But behind all that, this is our shared and common history, which is very rich there. Coming back, moving forward in history, we just celebrated the 80th anniversary of D-Day, 1944, which was a very special moment. You had that ceremonies in Normandy with head of states, which was very meaningful to see those veterans being there. There are very few now, very few. It's a memory that is fading away, but it's a memory that is very vivid. It's still very vivid in the memory of the French people. And I want to say that tonight, the French people, they are still very thankful. The gratitude in France is immense. It's really very strong today for America, for liberating France and Western Europe. Mm-hmm. And this is even more significant for us today, that if we talk about NATO, the roots of NATO were there, on the beaches of Normandy, because that alliance that was created, that landed on D-Day, it was the basics, the roots, the original foundations of NATO, of that great wartime alliance that continue to serve today as our shield. The unity of effort, the shared values that were demonstrated in that era, they are still alive today. They are still binding the 32 countries of NATO together. And today, NATO, our alliance, is as strong as those roots are deep in history. And it's very important for us alive today, especially for the military.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And I think it's so interesting to look back at history and realize what binds us now, and how important that still is to what you said, to highlight the importance of allies, particularly with common threats and the threats we are in right now, but also in the future. And so talking about that future, of course, the future is quite insecure, particularly with elections, both in France and the United States, which is something, that might lead to a different course of action that we cannot predict now. But there's so much else that you can also not predict, but that you're working on to try to predict, at least, which is, of course, one of your main core functions at Norfolk. So can you tell us a bit more about this future of NATO in particular, and the missions you're involved in?
Yes, it's true that we are into a very difficult and blurred time. The geopolitical environment is characterized by a lot of threats, a lot of countries or regimes that are questioning our way of life, our core values. We get a lot of political uncertainties. Well, in that framework, in that context, from a military perspective, for us, the military, we need to continue to plan, to foresee, to prepare for whatever will happen, and to defend our countries and our nations, which is what we're doing in Norfolk. We are working on the transformation. Once again, it's the Allied Command for Transformation. So we try to think about what the operational environments, what the geopolitical environments will look like within 20 years, or even later on. But it is preparing for the war of tomorrow. but also for the war of tonight, because war is at our borders, especially in the eastern flank of Europe. So we need to prepare for that. We need to look at new technologies, to look at the digital transformation, to look at AI, at all the new equipments or way of waging war, of doing operations, of decision-making process in operations, all that very broad range of new way of thinking about the war and the way we are connecting it. It's a lot of work. It's not an easy one, but France and the US are especially the US, they are one of the leading nations with NATO because of their leadership in technologies, in all the new way of doing business, including in the military that we can have in both our countries. So our cooperation is more important than ever when we're talking about transformation and looking at the future. And it's even more important that why we are doing all that. It's not to have the latest computer or the latest tank or aircraft, which is very fancy, and it's not the goal. The goal is to keep the edge, to keep the military advantage, to make sure that tomorrow our adversary, they will not beat us. Tomorrow will make sure that we'll still be able to defend our values, the core values that are at the foundation of NATO. Once again, that model is questioned by a lot of countries today, and we need to be ready tomorrow to defend those core values.
Oh, beautiful mission you have. Thank you so much for all these different questions. I'd like to open the room now to questions maybe here in the public or on Zoom. So I'm going to go to the Q&R here, and so please ask your questions if you're listening on Zoom in the chat box. But maybe we can start with a question here, if you have one, because we have a little bit of public in this room. I can at least go to there's a question here, which is of course quite predictable, dealing with the question on of the next French elections. And I don't think you can answer this directly, but of course, there's insecurity about the French political environment and how that might change the role in NATO. But do you have anything you could say about that? But of course, we have discussed before that with the current elections in place, Colonel Durand is not necessarily in place to comment on these questions, because there is a role for that in France. But would you have some overall comments on just the political system in France and how that might evolve in the next months, weeks, days, even?
Yes, sure. That's I was talking about incertitude and the blurred environment where we are heading to. I mean, the questions are also at political level in many countries, and France is not an exception in that. But from a military point of view, and I will just talk about what is my level as a military officer. The military, we need to be ready for anything. We need to serve our countries, and once again to be ready to defend our values, our way of life, our political system. Once again, coming back to NATO, if you look at the NATO treaty, within the NATO treaty, you have really those values about democracy, about freedom, about rule of law, and it's the same in France. In our country, the military, we are preparing to defend those values. It's not an easy task, because when you have to work and train for whatever will happen in 1 year, 5 year, a decade, it's quite difficult. It's quite difficult. But this is what we try to do in France, but also in Norfolk within the alliance, and do that with our other partners in the alliance, because once again, it's very important, I think, in that very complex and evolving environment to have strong allies.
Mm-hmm. Another question is, how does NATO cooperate with other international organizations such as the UN or the European Union, and how does that function?
Well, we have several links with the other main international organizations. Of course, the UN, which is the worldwide one, but I think the most special link we have is with the EU, because now among the 32 nations of NATO, 23 nations are member states of the European Union. So de facto, it creates a special link with the EU.
Yeah.
Since the origin, NATO is all about the link between North America and Europe. So it's very normal, very understandable that today that link between NATO and EU is strong. It comes from history, but it's also functional, because NATO is once again, it's a defensive alliance with a lot of military means, headquarters, command structure, and the EU also have a little bit of military, but more diverse tools in terms of crisis management, political tools, diplomatic tools. So they are very complementary. But we are on both sides. France is on both sides.
And with the United Nations too, of course.
Yeah, of course. But we need to have those discussions and links with the UN. Once again, because in every place where you have a crisis today or a conflict, the UN is playing a role. The challenge we have today is that at the UN we have a system that is quite, let's say, difficult to handle now with the current environment at political level.
Yeah. And there's a question on the financing of NATO, because of course there's always these discussions about the 2% of the GDP. And this question is a little more critical towards that, because about the nations that do not pay their part, why is that their perception on some nations paying their part and others that do, and the percentage? Maybe you can just comment more also generally on how that functions, really, like this percentage, because we hear about that a lot indeed in Europe in particular.
Well, numbers are important, but are they that important? I mean, the bottom line is that we have to put more efforts into the defense, into developing new capacities, strengthening our defense capacities. But this is what we're doing in the nations. And coming back to what I was saying about the Washington summit in a few days, this is something that everybody can see. That there was in the past years a huge effort of most nations, almost every nation in the alliance raised significantly its defense efforts, and with a huge amount of money into defense budgets. Now everybody is very much aware that danger is very at the gate, in Eastern Europe. So it's a very strong incentive to put more budget in the defense. And it's also the case for France. We have more than 2% of our GDP, 2.1, I think now, that is dedicated to the defense, which is huge, and which is even more significant is in those 2.1%. More than 1/3, I think it's 35% of this budget, is dedicated to strengthening our capacity, to modernizing our capacity, to creating new weapon system, new communication system, etc. So keeping the edge on the military field.
A question.
Yes, Colonel, thank you so much for everything you're doing in your comments this evening. Can you comment on NATO's view with China? China being one of the United States' peer competitors, growing their military. How does NATO view that dynamic. Can you comment generally on that?
I would like to just repeat the question if people in Zoom did not hear, but it's about the NATO's view of China, because of course, main competitor of the US and how the views and reactions towards China are within NATO.
Once again, I'm going to stay at the military level because I'm a military officer, because there is a political part in your question, and thank you for your question. But at military level, today we have one big adversary. We have one enemy who declared itself very clearly in the past years, especially in February 22, by invading part of Ukraine, and this is Russia. And we need to take care of Russia, not going at war with them. NATO is not at war with Russia, but we need to help Ukraine to win that war. It's very, once again, I'm coming back on that because it's very important for us, for our values of what we are fighting for. Talking about China, to answer your question, what we can see from a military perspective is that China is developing a very powerful military and armed forces, and it's raising very quickly. So, of course, we monitor that. Of course, we have to look at that, and after that, whether the Chinese army or military will be an adversary, an enemy, or a partner. I don't know. I hope it will not become an enemy, but we have to be prepared for anything.
So I saw one question, but I want to ask one too, because we had talked about this before, but the bracelet you're having on around your arm means something special.
Yeah, thank you for asking the question. Yeah, it's very special, that very small bracelet. I don't know if you can see it on the camera. It's a red, white, and blue bracelet. A very small one, but behind that small bracelet, there is a very important cause, because it's for our wounded soldiers. We wear that bracelet to raise awareness and funds for our wounded sailors, airmen, and soldiers who were wounded in a military operation, in service during recent operation. And something we do in the French armed forces, but the US military is doing something very similar, the British as well. We're doing that in France. So the basic principle is to doing some sports efforts, for example, running on stations that are taking care of the wounded and their families. So it's very important for us not to forget those who were wounded, who lost their lives, who gave their lives in the military. I have in Norfolk, within the community, a member of the community who was a former French commando. He lost both of his legs in Iraq, fighting ISIS. This guy is now participating in the Olympics in Paris. He's an example of courage and really determination. And for these soldiers, we really need to continue to do something today. So that bracelet is a symbol. It's a symbol of what we're doing with our sports team, running for them, raising funds for them. So we have a partnership for that with the Alliance Française of the Hampton Roads, the French alliance in the Hampton Roads area. So if you go on the website, you will have all information about this initiative. And if you want to participate, that will be more than welcome. Thank you very much.
Absolutely, yes. I hope people do. Another question was.
Yeah, it's very interesting that we just recently had the centennial anniversary of the First World War, the 75th of NATO, the 80th of D-Day, the 250th of the American Revolution.
So I'm just going to cut 1 second to say to the audience here. So we have all the different commemorations going from D-Day to the American Revolution that are happening now.
Can you just reflect a little bit on what kind of opportunity these things have? I mean, there's a lot of effort always to raise awareness. Do you see a particular challenge in the United States? You mentioned earlier how in France the memory is very, very much alive. because those conflicts happened there in a lot of way, and the American Revolution is a very long time ago here. What kind of opportunities do these anniversaries have to raise awareness of where we are right now and the importance of NATO and the fact that it has this heritage?
Mm-hmm. And so what are the opportunities for commemorations going from the D-Day commemorations, but also further back, American Revolution 250 years ago? Of course, the First World War is also an important moment where the United States, of course, also came to the aid of France. And there's a lot of other anniversaries celebrated in between all this. So what is the opportunity for this raising of awareness today?
It's a lot. It's a lot of opportunities. Once again, we have a rich history in France, but you have a rich history as well in the US. And we are very blessed in Norfolk and in the Hampton Roads region to have a lot of, we can commemorate that. I mean, if you go to the to Fort Story, for example, in Virginia Beach, this is where really a few miles away where Count Grass defeated the British fleet just before Yorktown, which is not far away from Norfolk as well, where you have that battlefield where when during the American Revolution, which was really maybe a turning point of the American Revolution. So the richness of that common history, because that's our shared history. It's the U.S. history, but that the French one as well. It's a very nice opportunity for us to maintain those links between our people, because we are sometimes the memory is fading away in Europe as in the U.S. We were talking about the veterans of World War II, but those veterans, there are very few now. I was in Bedford, Virginia on 6th June very recently. We were very honored to have, I think there were 20 veterans, but they are the 20 last veterans in the region. So meeting them was a chance really to see history and to thank them for their service, for what they've done. So all those opportunities, historical ones, behind the historical links, these are human links between nowadays people, nowadays military, who are assigned in that Hampton Roads, Norfolk area, and history, and the local U.S. community. And when people meet together, with the veterans, with the sons and daughters, the families of the veterans, or the local associations like the Friends of Lafayette or the Sons of American Revolution, for example, we have very, very good relationship, and it's very natural, and it's a blessing to have that kind of relationship, because behind that the common history of both our people.
Yeah, what you're saying, the human aspect of it all, it makes it less abstract, it makes it real, it makes it relatable still to us today. So thank you. Was there another? Yeah. No.
Which changes do you think will happen with the change of leadership from Stoltenberg to Mark Rutte?
So the change in leadership of NATO itself, of course, Secretary General Stoltenberg, which will be replaced by Rutte, who is Dutch. So I'm Dutch too, yes.
Yeah, you're talking about the Secretary General of NATO, who's going to change very soon. I think it's going to be in October. Well, this is the political level of the alliance. So he has a very important role in the alliance, because as a Secretary General, he's gathering around the table all the head of states and all the permanent representatives. So he's let's say he's handling all the discussions, all the negotiations we have in the NATO headquarters. Once again, the NATO brain in Brussels. So he's at the core of the brain. So a very important role. The previous Secretary General, the current one, Jens Stoltenberg, is a long-standing one. He's been a decade in that position. So he has a long memory, a long experience. I know he's going to hand over to Mr. Rutte. Maybe you know him maybe better than I do. But from a French perspective, seeing a former prime minister in one of the countries of the European Union being a Secretary General for NATO has a special meaning for us because once again France sees we see ourselves and our European fellows as the European pillar within NATO. So having a Dutch Secretary General, I think we're pretty much happy with that.
Very good. All right. So thank you so much for being here today. Thank you for those on Zoom. And thank you especially to Colonel Durand, who has been so nice to answer all the different questions from history to today. So thank you so much.
Thank you.